Branches lashed against her arms as she ran, slicing shallow lines across her blue-tinged skin. Rayleigh didn't feel them anymore. The pounding of her boots over root and gravel was the only rhythm keeping her steady, and even that threatened to falter with each breath. Her armor suit chimed warning tones in her ear. Dehydration, stress, microfracture on the right greave, oxygen dip, but she silenced them all with a twitch of her finger. The Calreth weren't the sort to wait for technical diagnostics. They were coming, and she was still very much catchable. Something cracked behind her, not a twig, something heavier. She ducked, veered left through a curtain of mist, nearly slipping on the moss-slick surface of an old comms panel that jutted from the forest floor like a rusted tombstone. This place had been abandoned for decades. That was the plan. Run where even scavengers didn't bother to check. She'd hoped the wilds of Raylon Delta's ghost sector would swallow her whole. Instead, they spat up a starship. It stood awkwardly between two collapsed towers, its plating dull with corrosion and half swallowed by moss and root. A Terran design, unmistakably ugly, boxy, over-engineered, proud in its clunkiness. Its name was faded, but the letters PEREGRINEDRIFT still ghosted across the hull like a half-remembered whisper. She didn't hesitate. The airlock groaned at her approach, as if surprised to be touched again. A faint hiss, a flicker of old systems spinning up, and the hatch shuddered open. The interior smelled of old polymers, cold metal, and dust that hadn't moved in years. She stepped inside and felt for the first time in hours the faint illusion of safety. Then a voice said, "If you're here to kill me, could you at least do it after I finish realigning the coffee dispenser?" She turned sharply. Across the corridor, half submerged in a maintenance panel, was a man. Human, blonde, grease-streaked, holding what looked suspiciously like half of a coffee maker fused to a screwdriver. They stared at each other for a second longer than logic permitted. He cleared his throat. "Or we could pretend I didn't say that and start over. Hi, I'm Kellen, and you are very armed." She didn't lower her weapon. "You live here?" "No, I'm haunting it. Boo." He waved his tool for emphasis. "But yes, I live here. Kind of. Sort of. It's a fixer-upper." A dull thud shook the ground beneath them. Rayleigh's eyes snapped to the ceiling, then to the corridors branching behind her. "Someone following you?" Kellen asked, not unkindly. "Because that sounded like a someone is following you kind of sound." She stepped past him without answering, weapon raised, scanning the chamber. The ship's systems were alive but flickering. Old AI lines sputtered in the background, failed subroutines muttering like ghosts. The mainframe blinked erratically. Kellen trailed her. "You know, if you're trying to impress me, breaking and entering while being chased by what I assume are murdery types is working surprisingly well." "Shut up," she muttered, reaching a terminal. Her fingers danced across it. The interface lagged, then flared to life. She muttered a phrase in Northiliari. The ship's AI pinged with a synthetic cough. "Hello again, sweet oblivion," it said with startling clarity. "SAM online. What fresh disappointment awakens me now?" Kellen winced. "Ah, yeah, forgot to mention. The AI's dramatic." "It's corrupted," Rayleigh observed, scanning code strings that looked more like poetry than protocol. "You installed a theatrical overlay?" "No, that's just how it woke up. It thinks it's an actor. I think it's having an identity crisis. The toaster also recites Shakespeare." Another rumble outside. She turned. "How fast can this thing take off?" Kellen's eyebrows rose. "You're kidding. You want to fly this thing?" She looked at him flatly. "Well," he said, already turning toward the cockpit, "I always wanted to explode in a magnificent fireball. Guess today's my lucky day." They stumbled into the bridge, Rayleigh navigating instinctively, flipping switches she shouldn't have known existed. The controls hummed beneath her hands like old friends waking up from a long dream. She didn't question it. The Calreth were closing in. She could feel their psychic trace like a pressure in her skull. Kellen buckled into the pilot's chair with a grunt. "You know how to fly this thing?" "No." "Fantastic. I'll scream something heroic before we die." She sat beside him, pulling up the nav array. "If you scream, I'll eject your seat. He grinned. Already love this partnership. The engines groaned as they cycled up, each system struggling through years of disuse and creative rewiring. Lights flickered. Gravity spasmed. The ship lurched free of its mossy cradle like a beast rising from hibernation. Someone once told me, Kellen said over the din, that I had a knack for attracting trouble. I thought they meant romantically, but I think they just meant I was doomed. Shut up and fly. I thought you were flying. The ship rocketed forward, scraping past branches, shattering through vines and launching them into the ashen skies above Raylan Delta. Alarms screamed. SAM recited part of Macbeth. A targeting lock chirped somewhere in the distance. Rayleigh didn't breathe until they broke through the clouds. The sky opened wide, revealing the shattered ring of satellites that once defended this sector. Beyond them, space beckoned, cold, silent, full of places to hide. Kellen slumped in his seat. Well, that was terrifying. Want to do it again next Tuesday? She glanced at him, unsure whether to laugh or knock him unconscious. Instead, she said, You should know. They'll come after this ship now. You're involved. Was that your way of saying thank you? Because it needs work. She didn't smile, but the tension in her shoulders eased just slightly. Somewhere in the dark corners of the ship, something hummed in response. A system that shouldn't have been active, a signal that hadn't pulsed in centuries. Neither of them noticed. Gravity pulsed weirdly for the third time in under an hour, which Rayleigh interpreted as either a serious mechanical flaw or an attempt by the ship to imitate interpretive dance. She gritted her teeth as the floor pitched sideways, the overhead lights flickered like drunk fireflies, and a low moan came from the reactor bay that sounded disturbingly like someone sighing after eating a bad sandwich. Kellen stumbled through the corridor behind her, arms flailing. Fun fact, your internal organs should never feel like they're in a lava lamp. Just learn that. Your ship is falling apart, Rayleigh muttered, one hand bracing against the wall. Kellen's voice came closer. Correction, my ship is holding together out of pure spite, which makes it perfect for me. They entered the engineering bay. Pipes hissed. Something sparked and hissed in a corner, where SAM had decided to construct what it called an aesthetic plasma sculpture, and Kellen called a death trap. With lights, Rayleigh ignored it. She had more pressing matters, like the knot of heat in her chest that had been pulsing ever since the jump. She reached under her armor and pressed her palm against the skin above her heart. It wasn't pain, not exactly. It was like a beacon humming through her bloodstream, ancient, familiar, and getting stronger. Kellen crouched beside a terminal, poking at it with the same tool he'd earlier tried to use as a weapon. So, I have good news and bad news. Which do you want first? Neither. That's fair. So the good news is, the stabilizers are still functioning. The bad news is, the stabilizers are functioning barely, and the ship's about one sarcastic comment away from turning us into a smear of ions. I thought you said it could fly. I said it did fly. Slight distinction. Sort of like saying a sandwich was edible before you dropped it into a wormhole. She knelt by the ship's power core. The metal panel beneath her hand felt wrong. Too warm. She peeled it back and exposed the crystalline core chamber. What she saw made her freeze. There was Sevillari tech woven into it. No human vessel should have that. No Terran-designed Junker should have a Sevillari interface glowing beneath its plating like a buried memory. The blue lines pulsed in the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Kellen looked over. Why are you frowning like you just realized the soup is sentient? This tech, it's not from your people. Nope, that was already in the ship when I found it. Most of the systems didn't even want to work until I accidentally rerouted power using a music player and a broken toothbrush. Pretty standard engineering, really. She leaned closer. Symbols etched into the interface shimmered faintly. Old Ortheliari, but older still, buried under dialects even the elders had forgotten. She shouldn't be able to read them, and yet one phrase lit up clearly when her fingers brushed it. Legacy thread detected. Kellen whistled. Ominous, glowing script. Always a good sign. She stood. This ship's not just a derelict, it's a carrier for something else, something ancient. Ancient like valuable or ancient like cursed? She didn't answer. The beacon in her chest pulsed again. The moment she touched the interface, it had strengthened, as if the ship were alive, and it recognized her. Okay, that's unsettling, Kellen said, watching her closely. You're glowing a little. Is that a normal thing for your people, or? It's not normal. Great. Unprecedented glowing. That's never ended badly in any story ever. She moved past him, heading toward the archives. Her boots thudded softly against the floor, which had finally stopped trying to twist sideways. Where's your data storage? Back corridor, third door on the right. Watch out for the thing in the vents. I think it's either a rat or a sentient hairball. You have vermin? Hard to say. I've only seen it twice. Once it hissed at me and stole a sock. She shot him a flat look over her shoulder. What? It was a nice sock. The archives were cluttered, unkempt, and smelled faintly of old toast. Kellen's filing system appeared to involve stacking data crystals in cups and labeling folders by how much they annoyed him. Rayleigh found the terminal and keyed in commands. She sifted through logs. Most were mundane: salvage reports, power stats, and one incident where Kellen tried to cook something called egg spaghetti and had to jettison the kitchen module. But then she found it, buried deep. A signal received 12 years ago, encrypted, old Ortheliari code. She cracked it easily. It was a location, a map fragment, overlaid with a glyph she hadn't seen since childhood. The symbol of the Echo Seed. A myth, a weapon, a legacy, supposedly wiped out in the final cycle of the Sevillari collapse. She sat back. Her breath shook. Kellen peeked into the room. You get quiet when you're about to say something dramatic. I'm bracing myself. This ship received a Sevillari signal. A map? A treasure map? He looked far too excited. Please say it leads to something fun, or at least something with less mold. It leads to a graveyard or a birthplace. I don't know which. Kellen blinked. Those are two very different things. Not to my people. She stood. The ship creaked again, but this time it felt less like strain and more like tension, as though it too were waking up to its own purpose. Something about Rayleigh had triggered a cascade. She knew now that she hadn't stumbled here by accident. The ship had called her, or she had been guided to it. Kellen scratched the back of his head. So, what? We follow this map and find whatever buried cosmic riddle your ancestors left behind? Maybe get chased by more bounty hunters and possibly that sock-eating vent creature? If we do nothing, the Calreth will find it first. They're not just hunting me. They want what I carry. And what is that exactly? She met his eyes. I don't know. He nodded slowly. Well, that's comforting. She turned to leave. He followed. As they moved through the corridor, the lights ahead flicked on before they reached them. Rayleigh didn't say anything, but her hand stayed near her weapon. Just putting this out there, Kellen added casually, if we're now part of some intergalactic mystery destiny plotline, I'm going to need at least better boots. Maybe a jacket with cool stripes. You're already annoying. That's all the flair you need. Rude. The ship adjusted course. Rayleigh hadn't touched the helm. Neither had Kellen. Somewhere deep in the bowels of the Peregrine Drift, the ancient system hummed with purpose, waking dormant layers of code that had not spoken for millennia. The stars outside shifted, and the path ahead glowed faintly, waiting. The storm hit them in open space, not with thunder or lightning, but with a digital scream that tore through their sensors and rattled the ship like it had something to say and didn't care if it broke a few bones making its point. Lights flared red. The ship's AI muttered something unintelligible in Old Ortheliari before rebooting itself with a disgruntled beep. Rayleigh clung to the control panel while Kellen swore and slapped buttons like he was playing an angry arcade game. I thought you said we were going around the interference field. I tried to go around it, but the ship has other opinions. Very opinionated ship, by the way. Reminds me of my Aunt Nora. Loud, erratic, and suspiciously fond of old music. Focus! Rayleigh shouted as the hull groaned under the pressure of a subspace surge that licked at the shields like static fire. He gave her a sheepish grin. Good news. I think we're close. Bad news, we might arrive in pieces. possibly steaming. The coordinates had led them here, deep into the Talvaran Drift, a chaotic belt of fragmented moons and buried wreckage, where only scavengers and fools dared venture, which in Kellen's words made them overqualified. The signal guiding them had grown stronger, clearer, and in the last hour had begun to sing, not in sound, but in memory. Rayleigh could feel it in her bones. When the storm cleared, the space beyond it was eerily calm. A single structure floated among the wreckage, a massive crystalline sphere cracked with age and glowing with pale light. Glyphs shimmered across its surface. The moment Rayleigh saw it, the beacon inside her heart quieted. Not stopped, settled, like a child who'd finally found its way home. "That's it," she said, voice hushed. Kellen stared. "Please tell me it's not alive." "It's not alive," she said, uncertain. "Cool. That's what people always say right before the giant space orb grows teeth." The ship docked with a slow, mechanical sigh. The airlock hissed open. Inside the structure was silence, deep and reverent. They stepped into a corridor lit by shifting light that seemed to flow along the walls. Rayleigh's steps echoed as if time itself paused to listen. Symbols on the walls began to glow as she passed. Kellen reached out and tapped one. It zapped him gently. "Ow. Okay, fine. No touching. Lesson learned." "This is a vault," she murmured. "A memory archive. Sevillari legacies were stored in these. Not just data, but experience, emotion, whole identities." Kellen blinked. "So, you're walking into a library of ghosts?" "More like echoes. My people believed memory could guide future bloodlines, that our ancestors would shape our decisions if we let them." He grinned. "That explains your dramatic flair." Genetics deeper in, they reached a chamber with a central pedestal. Floating above it was a prism, humming with power. Rayleigh approached it slowly. Her hand hovered near the surface. "Are you sure this is safe?" Kellen asked. "No." "Okay, just checking. You're glowing again, by the way." She touched the prism. There was no explosion, no blinding light, just a feeling, like falling through herself. Memories surged. She saw cities made of glass and stone, battles fought in silence, stars wept over, oaths made and broken. She saw a child, herself, running through moonlit fields. And then, she saw the origin, the seed. A long-forgotten truth rose in her. She wasn't just a refugee, she was a bearer. The last descendant of the Echo seed, a lineage created not for conquest, but for remembering. The weapon they feared wasn't destruction, it was knowledge. When she opened her eyes, Kellen was holding a wrench like it might help fight metaphysical concepts. "I think I remember everything," she whispered. "Good, because I'm out of metaphors and snacks." They returned to the ship. The vault dimmed behind them. In the quiet hum of the engine room, Rayleigh transmitted the stored knowledge across encrypted Sevillari channels. Echoes that would find dormant seeds scattered across the galaxy. Her people weren't extinct. They were sleeping. Kellen leaned against the console. "So, you're basically royalty now. Galactic librarian princess with trauma and a glowing chest. Kind of jealous." She smiled. "I was hunted because they thought I'd destroy something. But it was never about ending anything. It was about remembering what came before, so we wouldn't repeat it." He scratched his chin. "Deep. Also, slightly disappointing. I was hoping for a dramatic final battle, maybe with laser swords. They still might come. The Calreth won't stop. But now we have allies, and understanding. And snacks. I restocked the galley." She glanced at him. "Thank you." He tilted his head. "For the snacks? For everything." The ship drifted away from the vault. Behind them, the storm began to fade. Ahead, space stretched wide and dark, and full of stars that no longer felt so distant. Rayleigh stood at the viewport, her long ears twitching slightly at the sounds of the ship around her. Her armor bore new marks, symbols glowing faintly with knowledge now rekindled. Kellen flopped into the pilot's seat. "Where to now, Echo Lady?" She looked over her shoulder, eyes calm. "Wherever memory needs us." He grinned. "Please not the desert planet. Sand does terrible things to my hair." The ship jumped into the black, leaving behind the ruins of a forgotten war in carrying forward something far older, a promise reborn.